Oh my God. Get ready because what you're about to hear today will chill your blood and melt your heart at the same time. Imagine this. A powerful man, a millionaire who has it all, or so he thinks. Alexander Vanderbilt, owner of half the real estate sector in Los Angeles, a man everyone fears, returns to his mansion in Beverly Hills 3 hours earlier than planned. His flight got canceled, and he decided to surprise everyone at home. But the surprise, my dear friends, was on him, and what a surprise it was. What he found when he crossed that solid oak door wasn't his fiancée waiting with open arms or the orderly silence of a magazine-perfect house. No, what he found made him stagger, took the breath from his lungs, and left him rooted to the spot, unable to move. Come on, hit that red button and turn on the bell, because this story of injustice, betrayal, and redemption is just beginning. And I need you to tell me in the comments from what city you're watching today. I want to read all of you. Ready? Now hold on tight. Alexander got out of his armored SUV, a sleek black sedan. The driver tried to carry his briefcase, but with that brusque gesture that had stuck with him since he was widowed 2 years ago, he waved him off. He was tired, exhausted. Being the king of business wears you out, especially when you come home to a place that feels more like a cold museum than a home. He walked toward the main entrance. The house was immense, one of those modern ones with lots of white marble, high ceilings, and gigantic windows. Everything screamed money, but nothing whispered welcome. Alexander swiped his keycard, heard the security beep, and pushed the door open. Silence. That damn silence that always greeted him. His fiancée Cameron was probably at the club or the spa, spending the money he earned, and his kids, his twins Sammy and Leo, just 4 years old, were likely shut in their room with the iPad or taking their mandatory nap so as not to bother anyone. That was the routine. That was his gray life. Alexander dropped the briefcase in the entryway. The thud of leather against the floor echoed. He loosened his tie, feeling like he could finally breathe, but then he heard it. It wasn't the usual silence. It came from the end of the hallway, where the industrial kitchen was, which they hardly ever used because they always ordered from fancy restaurants. It was a strange noise, like bangs, metal clashing against metal. Alexander frowned. His heart started beating a little faster. A burglar. Someone had broken in during the security shift change. He walked slowly, stealthily. His Italian shoes made no sound on the shiny floor. As he got closer to the kitchen, the noise transformed. It wasn't just bangs anymore, it was laughter. High-pitched, crystal-clear, contagious laughter from kids. Alexander stopped dead. It had been months, maybe years, since he'd heard Sammy and Leo laugh like that. Normally, when he arrived, the kids were quiet, shy, almost afraid to break something. But those giggles sounded like pure life. And then he heard a woman's voice. It wasn't Cameron's shrill, demanding tone. It was soft, sweet, but firm, a voice singing something cheerful. "Come on, my favorite little chefs. More force with that dough. Let the flour fly," said the voice. Alexander felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. He pressed against the wall just before the kitchen doorframe. The smell hit him first. It didn't smell like cleaning products or expensive air freshener. It smelled like vanilla, melted butter, like home. With his heart in his throat, Alexander peeked his head around slowly. And what he saw, friends, what he saw was a scene he never, in a million years, expected to see in his perfect cold mansion. The kitchen, that immaculate kitchen of black granite and stainless steel, was a battlefield, but a beautiful battlefield. There was flour everywhere, on the floor, on the chairs, on the center island. There were eggshells on the table, a spilled but empty milk carton. And in the middle of that glorious mess were them, his sons Sammy and Leo standing, on the countertop of the center island. They wore oversized aprons smeared with chocolate and dough. Their little faces, those faces Alexander usually saw sad and pale, were red with excitement. with white flower mustaches and eyes sparkling with happiness. And next to them, with her back to the door, was she, Valerie, the new housekeeper they'd hired just a month ago. Alexander had only seen her in passing a couple of times, lowering her gaze and saying, "Good morning, sir," timidly. But now, there was no timidity. Valerie, a young woman about 25 or 26 with a figure the blue uniform couldn't fully hide, moved with vibrant energy. She had her yellow cleaning gloves on, but they were covered in dough. Her hair, usually tied in a strict bun, had loosened a bit, and some strands fell over her face, giving her a wild and beautiful look. "Careful, Leo! The tower's falling!" Valerie shouted, laughing as she caught a pancake in midair that one of the twins had tried to flip. "Me, Val! Me!" Sammy yelled, jumping up and down on the expensive marble. "Your turn, champ." Valerie held him by the waist with a maternal strength and security that left Alexander hypnotized. She lifted him like a feather so he could reach the mixing bowl. Alexander couldn't move. He was paralyzed. His rational mind, that businessman's mind calculating risks and benefits, screamed, "They're messing everything up. It's dangerous on the counter. That woman's breaking all the rules." But his heart that had been frozen since his wife's death, felt an unfamiliar warmth. He saw his sons happy, truly happy. Not with a new toy, not with a trip to Disneyland, but making a mess with flour and eggs. Valerie turned in profile to grab a cloth, and Alexander could see her clearly. She was beautiful. She had a natural beauty, no makeup, her skin glowing from the oven's heat. But what made her most beautiful wasn't her features. It was the smile, a genuine, patient smile full of love. She looked at the twins, not like an employee clocking hours and putting up with spoiled kids, but like someone who really enjoyed being with them. "Watch this," Valerie exclaimed, making a funny face. "I think this pancake looks like a dinosaur." "Roar!" the twins roared in unison, raising their dough-covered hands. Alexander felt a lump in his throat. When was the last time he played with them? When was the last time his house felt this alive? Suddenly, a shadow crossed his mind. Cameron, his fiancé. If Cameron saw this, if Cameron walked in right now and saw the flour on the imported Italian floor and the maid playing instead of cleaning, all hell would break loose. Cameron hated mess. Cameron hated the kids making noise. Cameron always said the help should be invisible, but Cameron wasn't there. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander was grateful his future wife wasn't home. He stayed hidden in the hallway's shadow, like an intruder in his own life, watching the most beautiful and painful spectacle he'd ever seen. Beautiful for the overflowing love, painful because it reminded him of everything he wasn't doing for his sons. And painful, too, because that woman, that humble young lady with yellow gloves, was filling the place that should have been their mother's, or even his own. Alexander clenched his fist, digging his nails into his palm. He wanted to go in, he wanted to yell, he wanted to hug them, but he did nothing. He just watched, and what he was about to discover, watching from the shadows, would change his life forever. Because in that moment, Alexander didn't know that innocent scene was just the start of a silent war inside that house. A war between Valerie's pure kindness and the hidden evil that was about to walk through the door. The millionaire took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in his hands. Just one more moment, he thought. Let them laugh one more minute. But fate, my friends, is capricious, and the time of peace was about to end in the cruelest way possible. Alexander was still there, static like a pillar of salt, unable to interrupt the magic. From his hiding spot, he could see every detail. He saw Valerie take a paper napkin and with infinite delicacy clean a glob of dough from Sammy's nose. The boy, who normally rejected physical contact from strangers and even his own father, let her clean him, closing his eyes and smiling, tilting his head toward her hand like a kitten seeking warmth. That simple gesture broke Alexander inside. He remembered Cameron's words from the night before while they dined at a luxury restaurant. Cameron, with her wine glass in hand, had said with disdain, "Oh, honey, those kids are uncontrollable. I really think they have some behavior issue. That new girl, Valerie, has no backbone. We should find a strict nanny from Europe, someone tough. Kids need a firm hand, not smiles. Firm hand." That's what Cameron wanted. But Alexander looked at the kitchen now and saw that what his sons needed wasn't a firm hand. It was this: love. Someone who would get down on the floor with them, or in this case, lift them onto the counter to create delicious chaos. "Val! Val!" Leo shouted, tugging at Valerie's blue apron. "It's burning! It's burning!" Valerie did a comical little jump, exaggerating the panic to make the kids laugh. "Operation Pancake Rescue," she announced in a radio announcer voice. With a quick, expert move, she saved the dough from the pan. It wasn't burned. It was golden. Perfect. She put it on a plate where there was already a tower of them, in different shapes and sizes, but made with pure joy. "Smells good," Sammy said, closing his eyes and inhaling the aroma. Yes, it smelled good. Alexander could smell it from the hallway. That sweet smell contrasted violently with the expensive, cold perfume scent that usually filled the house when Cameron was around. The scene was so intimate that Alexander felt guilty for spying. It was like watching something sacred. Valerie bent down a bit to be at the kids' level, even though they were still up on the high stools. Her face, lit by the afternoon light coming through the window, glowed. "All right, my loves," she said, lowering her voice in a confidential tone. "Now, the secret touch. Do you know the secret ingredient that makes them taste like heaven?" The twins shook their heads, eyes wide as saucers. Alexander leaned forward slightly too, wanting to know the answer. "The secret ingredient is..." Valerie paused dramatically and then tickled their bellies. "Lots of love and chocolate chips." The kids burst into laughter again. Valerie pulled out a bag of chocolate chips she'd hidden behind the toaster and started raining chocolate over the plates. Alexander felt a pang of envy. Yes, envy. Envy of that connection. Envy that an employee on minimum wage knew how to make his sons happier than he could with his millions in the bank. He realized how alone he was, how empty his life was between meetings, trips, and a fiancé who, to be honest, loved his credit card more than his kids. And then it happened. Alexander, absorbed in his thoughts with watery eyes, took a step back to retreat unseen, wanting to go to his office to process all this before officially arriving. But fate played a dirty trick. His heel bumped into a decorative vase on a hallway side table. The vase didn't break, but it wobbled, making a dry scraping noise against the table. Crack thump. The laughter stopped instantly. In the kitchen, time stopped. The laughter cut off abruptly. Valerie turned sharply toward the door, her eyes wide with fear. Her smile vanished in a fraction of a second, replaced by pure terror. She knew the bosses weren't due back for 3 hours. She knew the kitchen was a mess. She knew the kids were in a forbidden spot. "Sir," she exclaimed, her voice trembling, bringing her hands, still in yellow gloves covered in flour, to her mouth. The twins, seeing Valerie's scared face and the imposing figure of their father in the doorway, reacted on instinct. But they didn't run to him. They did something that shattered Alexander's heart into 1,000 pieces. They ran to hide behind Valerie's legs. Sammy clung to her right thigh, Leo to the left, peeking out their fearful little eyes. They sought protection. Protection from him, from their own father. The silence in the kitchen was now heavy, suffocating. Only the hum of the fridge could be heard. Valerie was pale. She thought of her job. She thought of her sick mother she supported with that salary. She thought she'd be fired right there for having the kitchen dirty and the kids in danger. "Mr. Vanderbilt, sir, I can explain," Valerie stammered, lowering her head in a gesture of submission that pained Alexander to see. "You arrived early. Sorry, they just wanted... Sorry for the mess. I'll clean it right now. In a second, it'll be spotless." "Please," Don't. She started frantically looking for a rag, her hands shaking so much it fell to the floor. She bent to pick it up, nearly on the verge of tears. Alexander looked at her, looked at the mess, looked at the flour on the floor, looked at his sons clinging to the blue fabric of her uniform like a lifeline in the ocean. Any other day, the strict businessman Alexander would have yelled, would have asked what this chaos meant, would have demanded order. But not today. Today, the image of interrupted happiness weighed more than cleanliness. Alexander entered the kitchen slowly. His steps echoed. Valerie closed her eyes, expecting the shout. The kids pressed closer to her. Alexander reached the center island, extended his hand. Valerie flinched, thinking he was pointing at something dirty, but Alexander didn't do that. He ran his index finger along a pile of spilled flour on the counter, then looked at his white finger. He raised his gaze and looked Valerie in the eyes. She was scared, but held his gaze with impressive dignity. "Valerie," Alexander said in his deep voice. "Yes, sir, I'm so sorry," she whispered. Alexander then looked at his sons, who watched him with distrust. And for the first time in years, Alexander smiled. Not a business smile, a sad but real smile. "Do the pancakes taste good?" he asked softly. The question hung in the air, unexpected. Valerie blinked, confused. The kids loosened their grip on Valerie's legs, surprised. "Dad?" Leo asked doubtfully. "They smell really good," Alexander continued, ignoring the monumental mess around him. "They have chocolate chips, right, Sammy?" The braver of the two took a step forward, still close to Valerie's protection. "Yeah, they're dinosaur-shaped. Val taught us." Dinosaur-shaped, Alexander crouched down, not caring that his $5,000 suit brushed the floor that might have flour remnants. "That sounds amazing. Do you think Dad can try one?" The atmosphere changed instantly. The tension popped like a soap bubble. Valerie let out the breath she'd been holding. She wasn't getting fired. The ogre wasn't yelling. "Yes!" the twins shouted, and this time, instead of hiding, they ran to the plate to offer one to their father. Alexander accepted the misshapen pancake and bit into it. It was a bit raw in the center and too sweet, but it tasted like blessed glory, like family. He looked at Valerie over the kids' heads. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Valerie blushed deeply and nodded, lowering her gaze with a shy smile. Alexander felt warmth in his chest. He was about to say something more, about to ask if he could help, even though he didn't know how to boil water, when the sharp, strident sound of the front doorbell cut through the moment like a knife. Ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong. It was insistent, impatient, annoying. Alexander's smile faded. Valerie stiffened again. The kids stopped laughing. Alexander checked his watch. It couldn't be. It was too early for any visit, unless... "Alexander, open up. I know you're there. I saw the driver's car." A muffled voice came from the entrance. Alexander's blood ran cold. It was Cameron. She'd arrived early too. And if he'd reacted with understanding, he knew with absolute certainty that Cameron wouldn't. "Oh no," Valerie whispered, looking at her stained uniform and the upside-down kitchen. "Clean the kids quick," Alexander ordered, but not with malice, with urgency, like a co-conspirator. "I'll stall her." But it was too late. The click-clack of stiletto heels echoed furiously against the marble hallway, approaching the kitchen like an oncoming storm. The villain had arrived, and the contrast between Valerie's warmth and the coldness about to enter was going to be devastating. Feel that. Feel that pressure in your chest, because I feel it. This is the exact moment where happiness, that fragile, newly discovered happiness, is about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The doorbell sound wasn't just an arrival notice, it was a sentence. Alexander, our millionaire who just awoke to life thanks to some simple pancakes and a golden-hearted housekeeper, now faces a reality he'd ignored for years. But what's about to happen in the next few minutes in that kitchen will define everyone's fate. If you've ever had to hide your happiness because some bitter person came to ruin it, give this video a like right now, because you'll understand perfectly what Valerie feels in this instant. The doorbell stopped ringing, but its echo still bounced off the marble walls of the mansion. In the kitchen, the warm air smelling of vanilla cooled instantly. Valerie reacted as if waking from a beautiful dream into a nightmare. Her eyes, which seconds before shone with laughter, filled with panic. She looked at the kitchen. Flour on the floor, eggshells on the table, spilled milk, and the heirs to the Vanderbilt fortune dirty from head to toe. "Oh my God, Miss Cameron," Valerie exclaimed, her voice choked. "Sir, please get out of here. If she sees you here, if she sees this, she'll fire me. She'll fire me, and I have nowhere to go." The desperation in Valerie's voice wasn't for herself. Alexander, a man who knows how to read people in business, noticed it immediately. She wasn't looking at her own stained uniform, worried about her clothes. She was looking at the kids. She was afraid they'd get scolded. Sammy and Leo, sensing the change in atmosphere, lowered their heads. The joy vanished. "Val, are we not playing anymore?" Leo asked in a tiny voice. Alexander felt a stab of rage. Rage at himself for letting his home become a place where his fiancée's arrival caused terror instead of joy. "No one's firing you, Valerie," Alexander said with a firmness that surprised even him. "Calm down." But Valerie was already moving. She frantically pulled off the yellow gloves and grabbed a damp cloth. "Kids, come quick, the faces," she whispered, trying to wipe the dough from Sammy's cheek. Her hands shook so much she could barely aim. Alexander saw the tremor in that hard-working woman's hands, saw her breathing was ragged, and without thinking twice, he did something that broke any barrier of social class or hierarchy between them. The millionaire stepped forward, took the cloth from Valerie's trembling hands, and their fingers brushed. It was a brief contact, just a second, but it was electric. Her skin was warm from work, his cold from the car's AC. Valerie froze, looking into his eyes, surprised by the humble gesture. "Let me," Alexander said softly. "You pick up the plates. I'll clean the kids." Can you imagine that? The great Alexander Vanderbilt, cleaning chocolate-smeared cheeks, knelt before his sons. "All right, champs, secret cleaning operation." He winked. The kids, who were scared, smiled timidly, seeing their dad act like a co-conspirator, not a judge. While Alexander cleaned his sons' faces with clumsy but loving delicacy, he heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. The security code had been entered. Click, beep, beep. Then the sound they all feared, the rhythmic, loud, authoritative clack, clack, clack of red-soled stilettos hitting the marble foyer floor. Steps that didn't ask permission, steps that demanded attention. "Alexander." Cameron's voice echoed from the entrance, shrill and loaded with that fake sweetness hypocritical people use. "I saw your briefcase in the entry. What a miracle, darling. I got back early from the spa because the masseuse was useless and hurt my back." The steps approached. Clack, 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 getting louder. Valerie was pale, picking up eggshells at inhuman speed, tossing them in the trash. Alexander stood with the kids half clean and positioned himself in front of them, and Valerie like a human shield. "We're in the kitchen, Cameron," Alexander replied. His voice sounded dry, different. No longer had the warmth from a minute ago. He'd put his armor back on. There was a pause in the steps. "In the kitchen?" Cameron's voice asked, now closer, with a tone of incredulity and disgust. "What are you doing in the kitchen, Alexander? That place smells like grease." The comment hung in the air before she appeared. Smells like grease. To Alexander, it smelled like home. To Cameron, it smelled like something inferior. Valerie smoothed her uniform, lowered her head, and clasped her hands in front of her apron, adopting the invisible servant posture. That transformation hurt Alexander more than any insult. Seeing a woman full of light dim herself voluntarily to not offend another was an injustice that burned his blood. "Everything's going to be okay," Alexander whispered to Valerie without looking at her, just as Cameron's shadow projected in the doorway. Sammy and Leo grabbed onto their father's pant legs. This time, they weren't just seeking Valerie. They felt their dad protecting them too. And that, friends, was a monumental advance. But the real test had just walked through the door. Cameron's figure appeared. She was impeccable, designer dress in cream, brand bag dangling from her forearm, perfectly styled blonde hair, and sunglasses she removed with a theatrical gesture upon entering. She was a stunning woman on the outside, no doubt, but her face twisted into a grimace of absolute horror as her eyes scanned the room. She didn't look at Alexander in the eyes, didn't look at the kids with love. Her eyes went straight to the flour stain on the floor, then to the dirty pan, and finally stabbed like daggers into Valerie. The silence that followed was dense, heavy, like the air before an electrical storm. Alexander held his breath. Valerie closed her eyes, awaiting the impact, and Cameron inhaled deeply, filling her lungs not with air, but with venom. And here it is, the moment we all feared but knew was coming. Look closely at this scene, because it represents the eternal struggle between appearance and essence. On one side, Cameron, rich, perfumed, perfect, but empty. On the other, Valerie, disheveled, flour-stained, humble, but full of love. And in the middle, a man about to decide which side his heart is on. What would you do if you saw someone humiliate the person who cares for your kids? Write it to me right now, because what Cameron is about to say has no forgiveness from God. Cameron dropped her designer bag on a clean chair with a disdainful gesture, as if everything around her was contaminated. But what the hell is this? Cameron hissed. Her voice wasn't a yell yet. It was something worse, a whisper loaded with disgust. Alexander, can you explain what's going on here? It looks like a pigsty. Alexander stepped forward, calm but firm. They were cooking, Cameron. The kids were hungry and... Cooking? She interrupted, letting out a nervous, mocking laugh. Please, Alexander, look at them. They're a mess. Look at the floor. It's Italian marble, for God's sake. Cameron walked into the center of the kitchen, dodging the flour stains like acid. She stopped in front of Valerie, who kept her head down. The height difference, accentuated by Cameron's heels, made Valerie look small, defenseless. You! Cameron yelled, pointing with a perfectly manicured finger. You're incompetent. I pay you to keep the house spotless, not to destroy it. Who gave you permission to make this disaster? Huh. Answer me when I talk to you. Valerie raised her gaze, eyes full of held-back tears, but with respect. Miss Cameron, the kids wanted to learn to make pancakes. I just wanted them to have some fun. I'm cleaning already, I swear. Have fun. Cameron let out a cruel laugh. You're not here to be their friend. You're here to serve, to clean. Look at yourself. You're embarrassing. You look like some street trash. Enough! Alexander's voice boomed in the kitchen, rattling the glasses. The shout was so powerful that Cameron jumped back, surprised. The twins shuddered, but didn't cry. They looked at their father in awe. They'd never heard him defend anyone like that against Cameron. Alexander walked until he was between the two women. His presence was imposing. He looked at Cameron with a coldness she didn't recognize. Don't talk to her like that, he said, lowering his tone but keeping the intensity. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was taking care of my sons. Something you, by the way, never do. Cameron's face transformed from disgust to indignation, then to expert manipulative victimization. She brought a hand to her chest, pretending to be hurt. How? She said, her voice trembling. Are you attacking me for defending your home? Alexander, please, look how she has the kids. They probably ate sugar and junk. They're going to get sick. I just worry about their well-being, and you treat me like this in front of the help. Cameron crouched toward the twins, trying to touch them, but with obvious stiffness. Poor little things. Look how this wild woman has them. Come to Mommy, Cameron, let's wash with antibacterial soap. But then the unthinkable happened. The wonderful. When Cameron stretched her hands toward Sammy, the boy backed away. Not just backed away, but let go of his father's leg and ran toward Valerie. Leo followed instantly. The two kids hugged the housekeeper's legs, further staining her uniform, seeking refuge from the woman who claimed to be their mother. The silence that followed was deafening. The image spoke for itself. The kids preferred the dirty maid over the perfect fiancé. Cameron was left with her hands in the air, humiliated. Her face turned red with rage. She straightened slowly, and her gaze changed. It was no longer just disgust. Now, it was pure hate. Hate toward Valerie for winning the kids' affection without even trying. "This is outrageous," Cameron murmured, regaining her cold composure. "You've turned the kids against me. You've brainwashed them." "They go where they feel love, Cameron," Alexander said, locking eyes with her. "And here in this kitchen is the only place they've found it today." Cameron clenched her jaw. She knew she'd lost this battle. She knew if she kept yelling, Alexander would side more with the employee. Cameron wasn't dumb. She was a strategist. She breathed deeply, forced a tense smile, and changed tactics. "Okay, Alexander," she said, softening her voice, though her eyes still sparked. "Maybe I overreacted. I'm stressed about the wedding, the preparations. I just want the best for them." She turned to Valerie, looking at her with blood-chilling superiority. "Clean this pigsty. I want the kitchen immaculate in 10 minutes, then bathe the kids and put on a clean uniform, please. I don't want to see that filth in my sight for one more second." Valerie nodded submissively. "Yes, miss. Right away." Cameron approached Alexander, adjusted his shirt collar with territorial possessiveness, and gave him a dry kiss on the cheek. "Let's go to the living room, love. I need a drink, and we have to talk about boundaries for the domestic help. We can't allow them to take these liberties. They start with pancakes and end up stealing the silverware." Alexander didn't respond. He let her lead him out of the kitchen, but before leaving, he turned. He sought Valerie's gaze. She was kneeling, hugging the twins, consoling them silently. Alexander felt a sharp pain in his chest. He knew Cameron wouldn't let this go. He knew that look from his fiancée, that this isn't over. "Look." While they walked to the living room, Cameron kept talking about flowers and banquets, but Alexander wasn't listening. His mind was in the kitchen, and he was right to worry, because while Alexander poured himself a scotch to swallow the bad taste, in Cameron's twisted mind, a plan was already brewing. She wasn't going to fire Valerie over some simple pancakes. That would be too obvious, and Alexander would defend her. No, she needed something bigger, something unforgivable, something that would destroy Alexander's trust forever. Cameron glanced sideways at Alexander's office, where he usually left his collectible watches on the desk. A malicious smile, almost imperceptible, curved her red-painted lips. "You'll see, you little dead fly," Cameron thought while sipping her champagne. "No one humiliates me in my own house. You're leaving here, but as a thief. Friends, get ready, because if you think the kitchen humiliation was bad, you have no idea of the deadly trap this woman is about to set. Evil has many faces, but envy's is the most dangerous of all. Are you ready to see how far human cruelty can go? Because the real horror story starts now. Have you ever felt someone whispering in your ear, and even though you know it's a lie, part of you starts to doubt? That's exactly what poison does. It doesn't kill instantly, it seeps in slowly, drop by drop, until it paralyzes the heart. And that night, in the Vanderbilt mansion, the poison wasn't in a wine glass, but in Cameron's sweet, calculated words. After the kitchen incident, the house had fallen into a sepulchral silence. Valerie, with red eyes from holding back tears, had left the kitchen spotless, as if angels had come down to clean, and retired to her service quarters. The twins were asleep, exhausted from the excitement and drama, but in the master bedroom, the luxury suite Alexander shared with the ghost of his loneliness, the real battle was about to begin. Alexander was sitting on the bed's edge, shirt unbuttoned, gaze lost in the Persian rug. In his mind, over and over, replayed the image of his sons laughing with flour. That laughter was worth millions. Then the bathroom door opened and out came Cameron. She didn't come out yelling, Oh no, friends. That would have been too easy. She came out wrapped in a silk robe the color of champagne, smelling of expensive creams, hair loose, with a rehearsed, worried expression from the mirror. She sat next to Alexander, put a soft hand on his shoulder, and sighed. "Oh, my love," she said in a velvety voice. "You don't know how worried I am. I didn't want to tell you before to not stress you with household issues. You work so hard, but today's was the last straw." Alexander tensed. He wanted to defend Valerie, but mental fatigue weakened him. "What are you talking about, Cameron? They were just making pancakes." "Alexander, please, don't be naive." Cameron stood and paced the room, gesturing gently. "It's not about the pancakes. It's about boundaries. That girl, Valerie, has something I don't like. I've seen her. I've seen her trying on my jewelry when she thinks no one's watching. I've seen her rifling through your drawers in the office." The millionaire snapped his head up. "What?" "That's a very serious accusation." "I know, and that's why I hadn't said anything," Cameron lied without blinking, looking at him with lamb-to-the-slaughter eyes. "But today, seeing her like that, with that confidence, manipulating the kids to disobey you, Alexander, that woman isn't good. Those smiles are fake. She does it to gain your trust and then, who knows, maybe rob us or worse, kidnap the kids. You know how unsafe things are in this city." The word kidnap hit Alexander where it hurt most. The fear of losing his sons. Cameron knew exactly which buttons to push. She knew Alexander was a logical man, but when it came to the twins' safety, he was irrational. "Valerie seems like a good girl," Alexander insisted, though doubt had already been planted in his chest like a weed. "The kids love her. Kids love anyone who gives them sweets and lets them make messes." "Alexander, they're babies," Cameron replied, approaching and caressing his cheek. "But you're the father. You have to protect them. And if one day that woman brings in her delinquent boyfriend and they empty the safe while we sleep, we can't trust people from that level, my life. They're different from us. They have needs, they have hunger, and hunger makes people do bad things." Alexander rubbed his temples. His head hurt. He wanted to believe in the innocence he'd seen in Valerie's eyes, but Cameron's words had that perverse logic of fear. "What do you suggest then?" he asked, defeated. Cameron smiled inwardly. She had him. "Cameras," she said, as if it just occurred to her. "We should install an internal closed-circuit system in the living room, hallways, and especially the kitchen and kids' room. That way we can see what she really does when we're not around. If she's as good as you say, she'll have nothing to fear, right?" Alexander thought about it. It was a drastic, invasive measure, but if Valerie was honest, the cameras would only confirm her goodness. And if Cameron was right, the cameras would save his family. "Okay," Alexander said, standing. "Tomorrow I'll call the security company." "Perfect." Cameron clapped softly. "But love, let's keep it a secret. Don't tell her, because if she knows she's being recorded, she'll behave. We need to see her true face." "Agreed," Alexander sentenced gravely. "Hidden cameras. No one will know. Not even you will know where the lenses are. I'll make sure it's an invisible system." Cameron felt a slight shiver hearing "not even you," but she dismissed it quickly. She was the lady of the house. She had nothing to fear, or so she thought. She approached Alexander and hugged him, resting her head on his chest. "We're doing it for the kids, my love. Just for them," whispered the Viper. Alexander returned the hug mechanically, looking out the window at the dark garden. He felt dirty, like a traitor, but the seed of distrust had taken root. Tomorrow, his home would become Big Brother. And what Alexander didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that those cameras Cameron so insisted on would ironically be the rope she'd hang herself with. Because truth, my friends, has a bad habit of coming to light always, and sometimes technology is karma's best ally. 3 days have passed. 3 days of tension you could cut with a knife in the Vanderbilt mansion. 3 days where Valerie has kept working with the same smile, unaware that from the most unsuspected ceiling corners, tiny digital eyes are watching her 24/7. Alexander has been reviewing the recordings at night, looking for the monster Cameron described. And what has he found? He's found Valerie singing Disney songs while mopping. He's found Valerie helping Sammy tie his shoes with infinite patience. He's found Valerie praying for the kids' health before bed. Each video is a slap to Cameron's lies. Alexander is about to cancel everything and apologize, but fate and human evil are quick. It's Tuesday afternoon. The sun streams strong through the windows. Alexander is in his office, locked in an important video conference with partners from New York. The door is closed. On his mahogany desk next to the computer rests his favorite watch, a solid gold Rolex, a collectible worth over $20,000. He took it off because it bothered him while typing, and there it sat, shining vulnerably. Upstairs, water sounds. It's the twins' bath time. Valerie is with them amid bubbles and rubber toys, totally occupied and making noise. Splish, splash. Valerie's cheerful voice echoes from afar. It's the perfect moment, the ideal stage for the crime. Cameron, who's been lurking around the house like a shark waiting for blood, spots the opportunity. She sees the red light on Alexander's phone indicating do not disturb. She hears the laughter from the upstairs bath. The house is empty. With the stealth of a cat burglar, Cameron enters Alexander's office without a sound. He's facing away with headphones on, focused on the screen. Cameron slips to the desk. Her eyes gleam with greed and malice at the golden watch. She takes it. The metal is cold in her hand, but it burns with excitement. She exits the office as quickly as she entered, closing the door with frightening softness. Her heart races, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of pure evil. She goes up the service stairs, not the main ones, to avoid being seen by the gardener outside. Cameron reaches the service area. It's a more modest, small space where Valerie keeps her things. There, hanging on a simple rack, is Valerie's purse, an old, worn, faux leather bag with a frayed strap. The contrast is brutal. Cameron's hand with diamond rings holding the gold Rolex, about to drop it into that humble purse that probably costs what Cameron spends on a latte. "Let's see how you explain this, you starving wretch," Cameron whispers with a twisted smile. She opens the purse zipper carefully. Inside are simple things: a knitted wallet, a photo of her mother, a rosary, and cheap lipstick. Cameron feels disgust touching the maid's things, but her hate is stronger. She drops the watch to the bottom of the purse, making sure it's hidden under the wallet, closes the purse, leaves it as it was. She looks in a small mirror on the service room wall and fixes her hair. "Goodbye, Valerie," she says to her own reflection. "It was a pleasure destroying you." Cameron leaves the room feeling victorious, untouchable. She thinks she's committed the perfect crime. She thinks her word against a housekeeper's will be enough. She thinks she has total control. But there's something Cameron forgot. Or maybe something her arrogance prevented her from considering. Right above the service room doorframe, camouflaged in a fake smoke detector that Alexander installed personally 2 days ago, is a small black lens, a glass eye that doesn't blink, a silent witness that saw everything. The camera recorded every move, recorded the sneaky entry, recorded the gold's gleam in her hand, recorded the malicious smile as she dropped the watch, and recorded the venomous whisper. While Cameron goes down the stairs humming a tune, convinced her plan is foolproof, the recording saves automatically to Alexander's private server in a folder called Home Security, a digital file that in a few hours will become the bomb exploding this villain's perfect life. Down in the bath, Valerie lifts the kids from the water, wraps them in soft towels, and kisses their wet foreheads, unaware that meters away her sentence has been signed, unaware she's carrying a time bomb in her purse. "Hungry, my loves?" Valerie asks sweetly. "Yes," the twins shout. Poor Valerie, she has no idea tonight's dinner won't be peaceful. She doesn't know the devil wears designer and lives under the same roof. But friends, don't fret yet, because though injustice seems to gain ground, remember one thing. When you act with evil, You always leave traces. And Cameron just left the biggest trace of her life in front of the one thing Alexander Vanderbilt respects more than money, the documented truth. The trap is set, the watch ticks inside the old purse, and Alexander is about to end his meeting. The horror and humiliation show is about to start, and I assure you, you'll want to yell at the screen when you see what Cameron is capable of in public. Ready to feel the rage? Because what's coming next is for those with a heart of stone if it doesn't outrage you. Night had fallen over Los Angeles like a heavy, dark blanket. In the Vanderbilt mansion, the indirect lights created an atmosphere of false calm, that tense calm before the most devastating earthquakes. Alexander had just finished his conference, rubbed his tired eyes, and reached for his desk to grab his watch, that gold Rolex that was more than jewelry. It was a gift from his late father, a symbol of legacy and effort. His hand groped the cold wood. Nothing. Alexander frowned, looked under papers, lifted the laptop, moved the empty coffee mug. Nothing. Strange, he muttered to himself. He was sure he'd left it there. Alexander is a man of routines, a man who never loses anything. His heart skipped a beat, not for the money. $20,000 is like $20 to him, but for the violation feeling. Someone had touched his things. He went out to the hallway. Cameron was in the living room, touching up her makeup in a hand mirror, humming a cheerful melody, too cheerful for such a silent house. "Cameron," he called seriously, "have you seen my watch? The gold one, I left it on the desk 2 hours ago." Cameron stopped humming, lowered the mirror slowly, and put on that cheap soap opera actress face, that faked worry she did so naturally. "The Rolex. No, my love, I haven't even gone into your office. You know I respect your sacred space." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "It's gone. I've looked everywhere." And there, friends, was when the viper struck. Cameron stood slowly, walked to him, and put a hand on his chest, looking at him with eyes that seemed like pools of sincerity, but hid alligators in the depths. "Alexander," she said in a whisper loaded with intent. "I don't want to be the one to say I told you so. But who else has been on this floor today?" Alexander froze. "Valerie," he said. The name tasted bitter in his mouth. "But she was with the kids." "Are you sure?" Cameron insisted, driving the doubt. "I saw her lurking in the hallway while you were on your call. She said she was dusting, but she looked nervous." And Alexander, that watch shines a lot. Temptation is big, my life, and people with needs, well, sometimes they can't resist. "I don't want to accuse without proof, Cameron," Alexander replied, though his voice lacked the same firmness. The cruel logic of Cameron made sense in his world of distrust. "Then let's find the proof," she said sharply. "Call her, tell her to bring her purse. If she has nothing to hide, she won't mind, but if she gets nervous, there's your answer." Alexander felt a knot in his stomach. It was humiliating to ask that of someone, but he needed to know. He needed to be sure he hadn't let a thief into his kid's home. "Valerie!" Alexander shouted. His voice echoed off the walls. Seconds later, Valerie appeared, coming down the service stairs. She no longer had the flour-stained uniform. She wore a clean one, impeccable, and looked tired but serene. "Yes, sir?" she asked sweetly. "I was folding the kids' clothes. Do you need something?" Cameron jumped in before Alexander could soften the blow. "Yes, we need something. We need you to bring your purse right now." Valerie blinked, confused. Her gaze went from Alexander to Cameron. "My purse, ma'am. For what?" "Don't ask questions and get it," Cameron barked. "Something valuable is missing in this house, and coincidentally, you're the only one who's been nearby. So if you're as honest as my fiancé says, go get your purse and empty it right here on the coffee table." The color drained from Valerie's face. She turned pale as paper. "Mr. Alexander, I haven't taken anything. I swear on the Bible." Her voice shook, and her eyes filled with tears of impotence. "If you haven't taken anything, no need to cry," Alexander said, hardening his heart. He hated seeing her cry, but he needed to see the purse. The doubt was eating at him. "Get the purse, Valerie, please. Let's end this quick." Valerie nodded slowly, swallowing her pride. She turned and went up the stairs with heavy steps, as if carrying the world's weight on her back. While she went up, Cameron approached Alexander and whispered, "Watch her hands when she comes down. Watch how she shakes. It's guilt, Alexander. It's guilt." Minutes later, Valerie returned. She carried her worn faux leather purse hugged to her chest, as if protecting the little privacy she had left. The twins, woken by Cameron's shouts, appeared on the stair railing, rubbing their eyes, watching the scene with fear. "Here it is," Valerie said, placing the purse on the glass coffee table in the living room. The silence was absolute. You could hear the AC hum. "Open it," Cameron ordered, crossing her arms with a barely disguised triumphant smile. Valerie, with violently shaking hands, opened the zipper. She started pulling out her things: an old comb, a pack of tissues, a hand-knitted wallet, a wrinkled photo of her mother. Each item was a testament to her simple, honest life. "There's nothing else," Valerie said, looking at Alexander with hope. "Empty it all," Cameron yelled, losing patience. She lunged at the table, grabbed the purse by the base, and shook it violently downward. And then it happened. The sound that broke everyone's souls present. Clank. Something heavy, metallic, and golden fell onto the glass table, spinning a couple times before stopping. The gold's gleam was unmistakable under the lamplight. It was the Rolex. Time stopped. Valerie stared at the watch, mouth open, unable to breathe. Her eyes bulged. She didn't understand how it got there. Alexander felt the ground open under his feet. The disappointment was a physical blow to the chest. He closed his eyes for a second, wishing it was a hallucination. But when he opened them, the watch was still there, accusing, shining, lying. "I knew it!" Cameron shrieked, pointing at Valerie like a demon. "Thief, little dead fly. There it is, Alexander, there's your good girl, robbing us under our noses." Valerie backed away, shaking her head frantically. No, sir, I didn't put that there, I swear. Someone planted it, I'd never." "Shut up." Alexander's voice was thunder, but not a yell of anger, a yell of pain. He felt betrayed, felt stupid for believing in her. Valerie fell to her knees on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, clasping her hands in plea. "Sir, please, think. Why would I want that? I just want to work. Don't do this to me." From the stairs came a sob. It was Sammy and Leo. Seeing their beloved Val on her knees crying, the kids started crying too, stumbling down the steps to go to her. "Val! Val!" the kids screamed, but Cameron blocked their path with coldness. "Don't go near that criminal," she yelled at the kids, scaring them more. The scene was hellish. The innocent accused, the villain triumphant, the kids crying, and the powerful man defeated by a lie. If right now your blood is boiling, if you want to jump into the story and shake Alexander to open his eyes, write justice in the comments. Because what's coming now is the darkest moment before dawn. The living room of the mansion had become a court without a judge, where the sentence was already passed before hearing the defense. Valerie was still on the floor, curled up, crying not from fear of jail, but from the stain on her honor. For a humble woman, her honesty is her only asset, and it was being stripped away before her eyes. Cameron, exultant, circled Valerie like a vulture stalking its dying prey. "Call the police, Alexander," Cameron demanded, pulling out her own phone. "Have them take her away in handcuffs. Let her rot in jail for abusing our trust. It's the least she deserves. Look how she cries." Crocodile tears. Alexander looked at the watch on the table, then at Valerie. His mind was chaos. The evidence was irrefutable. The watch was in her purse. There was no other logical explanation. But his instinct, that gut instinct that rarely failed him, screamed something was wrong. Valerie's desperation seemed so real, and Cameron's attitude, there was a gleam of pleasure in her eyes that repulsed Alexander. "Dad, no!" Sammy shouted, dodging Cameron and running to Valerie. Leo followed. The two little ones threw themselves on the floor and hugged the employee, clinging to her neck, crying heartbroken. "Don't go, Val. Don't go," the twins sobbed, wetting Valerie's uniform with their tears. Valerie, amid her own misfortune, instinctively wrapped her arms around the kids, protecting them, kissing their heads. "There, my loves, there, don't cry," she whispered to them, trying to console them, though she was crumbling herself. "Get them off her," Cameron shrieked. "She could hurt them. She's desperate." "Enough, Cameron." Alexander raised his hand to silence her. His voice was hoarse, broken. He saw that. Saw how even accused of theft and threatened with jail, Valerie's priority was still his sons. A selfish thief wouldn't do that. A cold criminal wouldn't console her victim's children. "Get away from her," Cameron continued. Valerie closed her eyes, expecting the blow, but Alexander didn't do that. "Sir," Valerie said in a choked voice, "call the police if you want. Search me entirely. Search my room. I'm not a thief. I love these kids like my own. I'd never do this to them." Alexander felt his heart break. He made a decision, one Cameron wouldn't like. "No police," he said dryly. "What?" Cameron jumped as if her tail had been stepped on. "Are you crazy? She stole a $20,000 watch. You have to report her." I said no. Alexander took the watch from the table and pocketed it without looking. "I'm not subjecting my sons to seeing their nanny taken away in handcuffs. They've suffered enough today." He crouched and gently pried the twins from Valerie. The kids resisted, kicking and screaming, but Alexander, with gentleness but firmness, handed them to Cameron's arms, who received them with disgust, keeping them away from her silk dress. Alexander helped Valerie stand. He didn't touch her with contempt, but with a strange, sad coldness. "Valerie, I can't have you in my house after this. The watch was in your purse. The trust is broken." "But, sir," she tried to protest. "Please," he interrupted, raising a hand. "Go. Pack your things and go now. I'll pay you the full month, but I want you gone tonight." Valerie understood there was nothing more to do. The rich man's word against the poor woman's, planted evidence against invisible truth. She nodded, defeated, wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Okay, sir. I'm leaving," she said with dignity. "But I want you to know one thing. God sees everything. And one day you'll know the truth. I just hope it's not too late for these kids." Valerie looked at the twins one last time. "Sammy and Leo, eat all your veggies, and don't forget to brush your teeth. I love you so much." The kids cried inconsolably, stretching their little arms toward her while Cameron held them tight. "Get out!" Cameron spat. "Scram, you thief!" Valerie took her purse, that cursed purse where her doom had been planted, and walked to the door. Each step echoed in the house's silence like a hammer on Alexander's conscience. When the front door closed behind her, a sepulchral silence invaded the mansion. It no longer felt like a home. It felt like a marble tomb. Alexander stood in the middle of the living room, feeling lonelier than ever. He had his watch back. Yes, he had his perfect fiancée by his side, but he felt he'd just lost something infinitely more valuable than gold. Cameron released the kids, who ran upstairs crying and slammed their door. She fixed her dress, smiling with satisfaction, and approached Alexander to hug him. "You did the right thing, my love. You protected us. Now we're safe. Tomorrow I'll call a real agency. People with class. We'll forget that trash in 2 days." Alexander didn't return the hug. He felt dirty from her touch. "I'm going to my office," he said, pulling away. "I need to be alone. Of course, love. Rest." "It was a hard day," Cameron said dismissively, already planning how to redecorate the service room into her shoe closet. Alexander walked to his office and locked the door. He slumped in his leather chair, took the watch from his pocket, and tossed it on the desk with contempt. He hated that watch now. He poured a glass of scotch. His hands shook. Why? He wondered. Why would she do it? She seemed so honest. He took a long sip, feeling the alcohol burn his throat, and then his gaze fell on his computer screen. The screensaver was active. He moved the mouse to wake the machine. There, on his PC desktop, was a blinking notification from the new security system. New files detected. Camera 04, service, hallway. Alexander stared at the notification. He'd completely forgotten about the hidden cameras amid the drama. His heart started pounding hard, a heavy, painful beat. And if the doubt, that small spark Cameron couldn't fully extinguish, ignited again. Alexander moved his hand to the mouse. He was afraid to confirm Valerie was a thief and lose faith in humanity, but also afraid to discover something worse. "Let's see the truth," Alexander whispered in his office's solitude. He double-clicked the file. The video player opened. The date and time stamped 5:45 p.m. that same day. What appeared on the screen made Alexander drop his scotch glass. The crystal shattered on the floor, spilling amber liquid and ice everywhere, but Alexander didn't flinch. His eyes were glued to the monitor, wide open, full of blood-chilling horror. There was the truth in high definition. He saw Cameron enter, saw the malicious smile, saw the watch in her hand, saw her put it in Valerie's purse. Alexander felt short of breath. It wasn't just disappointment, it was nausea. He was sleeping with the enemy. He'd thrown an innocent woman out into the night, humiliated, while the real culprit hugged him and said, "My love." Alexander stood from the chair, trembling with pure fury, a volcanic, primal fury. The Viper had made a fatal mistake. She'd left a digital footprint. And now Alexander Vanderbilt didn't want peace. He wanted the truth to be known. And revenge, my friends, is served cold and on a giant screen. Ready to see the villain fall? Because the next part won't be an engagement dinner. It'll be a public execution. Have you ever heard the saying, "No one knows what they have until they lose it"? Well, in the Vanderbilt mansion, that phrase became a curse. From night to morning, just 48 hours have passed since Valerie was unjustly expelled with tears in her eyes and a false accusation on her back. Only 2 days. But if you entered that house today, you'd think 10 years of neglect had gone by. The shine is gone, the joy vanished, and what's left, friends, what's left is hell on earth. If you have kids, prepare yourself, because seeing a child suffer from the absence of who loves them is a pain you wouldn't wish on anyone. Give a like if you believe kids have a sixth sense for detecting bad people. The morning of the third day dawned gray in Los Angeles, as if the sky itself was mourning the injustice. In the kitchen, where before there were laughs, vanilla scent, and dinosaur-shaped pancakes, now chaos reigned with a burned smell. Cameron stood before the stove in a silk robe stained with coffee, hair messed. The perfect woman was crumbling before motherhood's reality. She was trying to make scrambled eggs, but they'd stuck to the pan, and smoke filled the room. "Damn it!" Cameron yelled, throwing the spatula into the sink with fury. "Why is this kitchen so complicated?" Even for this, that useless one was good. Seated at the table in their booster seats were Sammy and Leo, but they weren't the giggling kids from days ago. They were pale, with dark circles and swollen eyes from crying. They wore the same pajamas for 2 days because they refused Cameron dressing them. Before them, 2 plates with burned eggs and black toast. "Eat it," Cameron ordered, turning to them with a crazed look. "You've gone 2 days without a bite. If your father comes down and sees you haven't eaten, he'll blame me." "Swallow." Sammy pushed the plate with his little hand in disgust. "Don't want, tastes yucky. I want Val." The mention of the forbidden name was like pouring gasoline on fire. Cameron strode over. She grabbed Sammy's arm hard, digging her perfect manicure nails into the boy's tender skin. "Don't say that name in this house again," she hissed, bringing her face close to the child's. "That woman was a thief, a dirty one. She's gone. She's dead to you, understand? Now you're hurting me," Sammy cried, trying to pull away. Dad, your dad won't hear you. He's busy working to pay for your whims." Cameron shook him roughly. "And if you tell him if you dare complain, I swear I'll throw all your toys in the trash. Hear me?" Leo, seeing his brother cry, started screaming too, throwing his orange juice glass to the floor. The glass broke, and the orange liquid spread over the marble, mixing with the dirt from previous days. "Stop! You're monsters!" Cameron screamed, losing control completely. She raised her hand, threatening to slap Leo. At that exact instant, Alexander appeared in the kitchen door. He wore the same wrinkled suit from yesterday. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from a cold, calculated fury he'd nurtured for hours. "What's going on here?" Alexander asked. His voice was low but sharp as a razor. Cameron froze. The raised hand for the slap changed trajectory mid-air and landed softly on Leo's head, turning the hit into a clumsy, fake caress. "Oh, love!" Cameron exclaimed, changing her witch face to victim in a second. "So glad you came down. I'm desperate. These kids are impossible. Look what they did. Threw the juice. They won't eat what I made with so much love. They're driving me crazy. They miss that thief and take it out on me." Alexander didn't look at the spilled juice. He looked at Sammy's arm. There, on the boy's white skin, 3 red crescents were marking Cameron's nail marks. Alexander felt his blood boil in his veins. He wanted to lunge at her. He wanted to yell that he knew everything, that he'd seen her steal, that he'd seen her abuse. He wanted to kick her out right then, but he restrained himself. He restrained because a private expulsion wasn't enough. Cameron had humiliated Valerie publicly. Cameron had destroyed an innocent's reputation before the whole house. The punishment had to be equally public. The engagement dinner was tonight, and Alexander wanted Cameron's fall to be a spectacle no one would forget. "Leave them," Alexander said with terrifying calm. "Go get ready. You need to be perfect for tonight's dinner. The partners, the press, your family are coming." Cameron's eyes lit up. Vanity overpowered anger. "The dinner's still on?" she asked. Surprised. "I thought with all this stress—" "Of course it's on," Alexander lied, locking eyes with her. "It's going to be an unforgettable night, Cameron, I promise. A night that'll mark our lives forever." Cameron smiled arrogantly, believing she had the millionaire eating from her hand. She approached and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Alexander had to make a superhuman effort not to vomit right there. "You're the best, my love. I'm going to an emergency spa to fix this mess." She touched her hair. "Oh, and please, call the agency to send someone to clean this. I wasn't born to mop." Cameron left the kitchen, clacking her heels, leaving behind 2 crying kids and a man about to become his own fiancé's executioner. Alexander waited to hear the front door close, then ran to his son's, knelt on the sticky floor, not caring about his designer pants. "Dad, Val, we want Val," Sammy sobbed, hugging his father's neck. Alexander hugged them desperately, kissed the red marks on his son's arm, and a solitary, heavy, painful tear rolled down his cheek. "I know, champs. I know," Alexander whispered, voice broken. Forgive me for being so blind, but I promise you something. Today everything changes. Val's coming back, and the witch is going away forever." The kids looked at him, not fully understanding, but feeling the security in their father's promise. Alexander stood. No more doubts, no more mercy. He took his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Pedro," he said when his trusted driver answered, "I need you to do something very important. It's not a company errand. It's personal, life or death. I need you to go to the neighborhood in South LA. I need you to find Valerie. And, Pedro, don't take no for an answer. Bring her to the mansion before 8 p.m. He hung up, looked at the kitchen mess one last time. "Enjoy your spa, Cameron," he thought, "because it's the last luxury you'll have on my dime." Alexander locked himself in his office. He told the staff not to disturb him under any circumstances. The house was silent again, but now it was the silence of strategy, not loneliness. On his desk, 3 monitors glowed in the dim light. Alexander sat in his leather chair, which creaked under his tension. He had to prepare everything. No mistakes. If he was going to destroy Cameron before he needed the evidence to be conclusive, brutal, undeniable, He opened the security files folder. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but pure adrenaline. "Let's see who you really are, Cameron Hayes," he murmured. First, he opened the crime video, watched it for the 10th time. There it was, 5:45 p.m. Cameron entering, the greedy look, the theft, placing the watch in the purse, the evil smile. As she exited, Alexander felt a stab of disgust. How could he have kissed those lips? How could he have thought of marrying that woman? She was a snake in silk skin. He cut the clip and saved it in a folder called Final Evidence, but didn't stop there. He knew the theft was enough for police, but to cancel her socially, for everyone to see her rotten soul, he needed more. He needed to show the contrast. He started reviewing previous days' recordings, hours of video, and what he found tore his soul. Video 1, Tuesday 10 a.m., living room. Cameron sat on the sofa scrolling Instagram. Sammy approached with a drawing. "Look, Mommy Cameron, I drew you," the boy said with illusion. Cameron didn't even look up from her phone. "Get that out of my face, Samuel. You're blocking the light. And don't call me Mommy. Call me Cameron." The boy walked away crestfallen, tearing the drawing in his hands. Alexander punched the desk. He growled, kept searching. He wanted to see Valerie. He needed to see her to remember why he was doing this. Video 2, Monday 4 p.m. playroom. Valerie sat on the floor surrounded by building blocks. "Let's build the tallest castle in the world," she said enthusiastically. "Yes!" the twins shouted. Suddenly, Leo's tower fell on him, hitting his finger. He started crying. Valerie's reaction was immediate. She didn't get annoyed by the noise. She took him in her arms, kissed the finger, "Heel, heel, little frogtail," and started tickling him until the cry turned to laughter. Alexander saw Valerie hug him with love so genuine it transcended the screen. He saw her wipe his tears with tenderness, saw the peace in his son's eyes. Alexander felt his own tears fall. He realized he'd been an idiot, a blind man obsessed with work and status, while the real wealth was there on his home's floor, dressed in a blue uniform. He'd fired an angel to keep a demon. He kept editing, cut the torn drawing scene, cut the kitchen pinches from that morning. Yes, the cameras caught everything, even the moment he entered. Then he selected Valerie's best moments, teaching them to pray, singing them to sleep, making the famous pancakes. He made a 5-minute montage, the file title, The Truth. He loaded it onto an encrypted USB, stood, and walked to the window. The sun was setting. Guests would arrive in 2 hours. The city's elite, Cameron's arrogant parents, his investor partners. Everything was ready. The projector in the main hall was connected to the central system. He just had to plug in the USB and play. His phone buzzed. It was Pedro, the driver. "Sir, I found her," Pedro's voice said, sounding agitated. "But she doesn't want to come. She's very hurt, sir. She says she doesn't want to set foot in that house where they treated her like a criminal. She's crying. Her mom's very scared." Alexander closed his eyes. He deserved it. Deserved her contempt. "Put her on, Pedro. Turn on speaker," he ordered. There was silence, then Valerie's hitched breathing. "Mr. Vanderbilt, please, leave us alone. You already fired me, humiliated me. I don't have the watch, I swear." Hearing her broken voice was like a gunshot. "Valerie, listen to me," Alexander said with a softness Pedro had never heard from his boss. "I'm not calling to accuse you. I'm calling to apologize. I know it wasn't you." There was stunned silence on the line. "What?" she stammered. "I know everything, Valerie. I saw the cameras. I know who did it. I know you were the victim of a disgusting setup, and I know my sons haven't stopped crying since you left." Valerie's sob came through the line. "Valerie, I need you to come." Alexander continued urgently, not to work, but to see justice done. "Tonight I'm clearing your name in front of everyone, in front of the woman who did this to you, but I need you here. I need you to walk through the door with your head high. Pedro will take you to a boutique first, I want you to buy the most beautiful dress you find. You're not coming as an employee. You're coming as my guest of honor." "Sir, I don't know. I'm scared," she whispered. "Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. I give you my word as a man. Please, Valerie, do it for Sammy and Leo. They need you, and so do I." The last phrase slipped out without thinking, but it was the biggest truth he'd said in years. There was a long, eternal pause. Alexander held his breath. "Okay," Valerie finally said, voice shaky but firm. "I'll go for the kids." "Thank you," Alexander sighed. "Pedro will take care of you. See you in 2 hours." He hung up. He felt light. He felt powerful. Not money's power, but truth's power. He showered, shaved, put on his best black tux, looked in the mirror, and adjusted his bow tie. He no longer saw the sad widower. He saw a father ready to fight. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. First guests arriving. Fake laughs, clinking glasses. Cameron must be down already, shining like a fake star, greeting flatterers, showing off her engagement ring, unaware she was standing on a trap door about to open. Alexander took the USB, clenched it in his fist, and left the office. He descended the stairs slowly, like a predator entering the arena. The party had begun, but the real show, friends, the real show was just one click away. Friends, if you've ever been to a party where the clothes are expensive but the people are cheap in spirit, you'll know exactly how the atmosphere felt in the Vanderbilt mansion that night. The air smelled of perfumes imported from Paris and salmon canapes, but underneath, if you paid attention, you could smell the rancid hypocrisy. It was a scene worthy of a painting. Crystal chandeliers gleaming, soft live piano music, and waiters passing silver trays. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. Alexander descended the stairs. He looked impeccable in his black tux, like a fairy tale prince. But his eyes? Oh, his eyes didn't have a lover's sparkle. They had the cold gleam of steel before cutting. He moved among the guests like a shark in a goldfish pond, greeting, shaking hands, accepting congratulations for his upcoming marriage. Each congrats was like a needle in his patience, but he smiled. He smiled because he knew the play's end was near. Cameron was in her element. She was the night's queen. She wore a blood-red dress, tight, with a plunging neckline and diamonds dangling from her neck and ears. She paraded arm in arm with her mother, a lady as haughty as her, showing off the engagement ring. "Oh, Mom, finally I have the house under control," Cameron said to her mother with a champagne glass in hand, loud enough for her friends to hear. "I had to fire the help this morning. Imagine. I discovered the nanny was a little thief. Low-class people. You know how they are. Give them an inch and they take the Rolex." Cameron's mother, Mrs. Hayes, made an exaggerated grimace of disgust. "How horrible, daughter. That's why I always tell you to be careful who you let in the house. Those people always have tricks, but good thing Alexander has a strong woman like you to set order." Alexander, just a few feet away pretending to talk to a partner, heard every word. He gripped his glass so hard it nearly shattered. Low-class people, he thought. If they knew the only trash here wears diamonds. Dinner was about to be served. The guests, about 50 from Society's cream, started heading to the grand dining room. Cameron sought Alexander with her gaze and made possessive signs for him to join her. "My love, come. Let's sit at the head. Mom wants to talk to you about the wedding list," Cameron said, hooking her arm like a tick. Alexander looked at her, and for the first time that night, his mask slipped a bit. He gave her such an empty stare that Cameron shivered. "Not yet, dear. One guest is missing." Cameron frowned, confused. "A guest? Who?" "Everyone's here. The Hayes, the elites, the executives. No one's important missing. The guest of honor is missing," Alexander said, checking his watch. It was 8:00 p.m. on the dot. At that precise instant, the main doorbell rang over the piano music. It wasn't a normal ring. It sounded like a bell announcing fate. The butler, an older, discreet man who'd also suffered Cameron's yells, went to the door. Silence fell in the foyer. Everyone turned curiously. Who arrives late to such an important dinner? The double-carved wood door opened slowly, and what entered through that door made Cameron drop her champagne glass. The crystals shattered on the floor, splashing her mother's dress. But no one cared. No one looked at the stain. All eyes were fixed on the woman standing in the threshold. It was Valerie, but not the Valerie in blue uniform and rubber gloves. Not the humble Valerie with tied hair and bare face. She was a vision. She wore a long dress in midnight blue, a deep, elegant blue that highlighted her warm skin. The fabric fell over her body with liquid softness, marking her figure respectfully but undeniably beautiful. Her hair, usually hidden, fell in soft waves over her shoulders, shiny and silky. She had subtle makeup enhancing her large, expressive eyes, those eyes now looking forward with a mix of fear and dignity. She wore no expensive jewelry, no diamonds, just her presence shining brighter than any gem in that room. A collective murmur arose. Men looked at her with admiration, women with envy and curiosity. "Who is she?" they whispered. "Is she an actress? A model?" Cameron turned red, not from shame but volcanic anger. She recognized her enemy instantly, despite the transformation. "What is this one doing here?" Cameron screamed, breaking protocol and the evening's elegance. Her shrill voice echoed in the silence. "Security! Security! Get this intruder out! It's the thief! She's back to steal!" Valerie took a step back, scared by the screams. Pedro, the driver, behind her like a loyal bodyguard, put a hand on her back for courage. Cameron lunged forward like a beast, forgetting her society lady role. "Get out of my house. How dare you come here in that outfit? You probably stole it too?" she yelled in Valerie's face, pointing at the door with a trembling finger. "Butler, call the police. This woman is a criminal." The guests were in shock. They'd never seen sweet Cameron lose her cool like that. Mrs. Hayes tried to calm her daughter, but Cameron was out of control. "No one's calling the police." Alexander's voice cut the air like a whip. He walked from the salon's center to the entrance with firm, decided steps. He passed Cameron, ignoring her like an annoying piece of furniture, and stopped before Valerie. He looked her in the eyes. Valerie trembled slightly. "Sorry, sir, I shouldn't have come." "She hates me," Valerie whispered, about to turn. Alexander took her hand not roughly, but with delicacy that left everyone gaping. He raised the housekeeper's hand and kissed it softly. "Welcome, Valerie. You look beautiful." The audience's gasp was audible. Cameron stood mouth open, unable to process what she saw. Her fiancé, the untouchable millionaire, kissing the hand of the woman she'd humiliated hours before. "Alexander!" Cameron shrieked with rage, tears in her eyes. "What are you doing? That woman stole from me!" "She's a servant. You've gone mad. You're humiliating me in front of my parents." Alexander turned slowly to Cameron. His face was stone. "She's my guest of honor, Cameron, and she'll sit at my table. And if anyone has a problem with that..." Alexander swept the room with his gaze, daring anyone to speak. "The door is wide open for you to leave." Cameron felt the world spin. She was cornered. If she made a bigger scene, she'd look like a hysterical lunatic before society. If she shut up, she accepted the humiliation. Her mother, Mrs. Hayes, whispered in her ear, "Calm down, Cameron. Don't make a spectacle." Alexander must have a reason. Maybe he wants to expose her or something. "Keep class, for God's sake." Cameron breathed deep, swallowing her venom. She looked at Valerie with a death promise in her eyes. "You'll regret crossing that door," she thought, but aloud she said with a tense, fake smile, "Well, if my fiancé insists on charity and inviting the needy to our table, I guess we can add an extra chair." Alexander didn't respond to the provocation, offered his arm to Valerie. "May I?" he said. Valerie, still dazed, nodded and took his arm. They walked together to the dining room, crossing the sea of people parting like the Red Sea. Alexander seated her in the chair to his right, place of honor, displacing Cameron's mother to the third. Dinner began, but no one ate. The tension was so thick you could chew it. Cameron stabbed her utensils into the plate with fury, staring at Valerie. Valerie stared at her plate, not daring to look up, and Alexander waited for the perfect moment because revenge is a dish served cold, and tonight's dessert would be explosive. The waiters cleared the main course plates. Almost no one had eaten. The atmosphere was charged with static electricity. Cameron had tried a couple times to humiliate Valerie with subtle comments about utensils. "Careful, dear, that's the salad fork, not the fish one. Though I suppose in your home they don't use so many forks." But Alexander deflected each attack with an icy stare. The toast moment arrived. Alexander stood, holding his baccarat crystal glass high. He tinged a spoon against the rim, producing that sharp sound calling for absolute silence. "Attention, please," Alexander said. His voice was grave, powerful, filling the high-ceilinged dining room. All guests quieted. Cameron smiled triumphantly, thinking Alexander would finally announce the wedding date or make a joke about the peculiar guest to ease the mood. She fixed her hair, ready to be the center of attention. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," Alexander began, scanning the faces of his partners and relatives. This night was supposed to celebrate an engagement, the union of two families. But life has curious ways of teaching us what's truly valuable. Cameron frowned. Something in Alexander's tone she didn't like. It didn't sound like love. It sounded like a verdict. In my business, real estate, we learn that if the foundations are rotten, no matter how pretty you paint the facade, the house will fall. Alexander continued. And in my personal life, I've discovered I've been building on lies. A murmur ran through the table. Mrs. Hayes fanned herself nervously. "Today someone in this house was unjustly accused of a crime," Alexander said, looking directly at Valerie, who raised her gaze surprised. "She was humiliated, thrown out on the street, called a thief by someone who swore to love me and my sons." Cameron paled, stood abruptly. "Alexander, love, I think you've drunk too much. Better we—" "Sit down," Alexander roared. It was such an authoritative shout that Cameron fell back in her chair as if her legs were cut. "No one moves," Alexander ordered, "because before moving on with my life, I need to clean my house, and I need all of you to witness the truth." Alexander pulled a small remote from his pocket and pointed at the back wall of the dining room, where there was a retractable projection screen he used for business presentations. The screen lowered with a mechanical hum. The dining room lights dimmed automatically. "Let me introduce you to the real Cameron Hayes," Alexander said with contempt. He pressed play. The image appeared giant, sharp, in high definition. It was Alexander's office. The date and time in the top right corner marked 5:45 p.m. that day. Cameron was seen entering, her furtive look, how she took the gold Rolex from the desk. There was a collective gasp in the room. "My God!" a lady exclaimed. Alexander's partners looked at each other, scandalized. But the video continued. Cameron was seen walking to the service quarters. Seen opening Valerie's humble purse. Seen the evil smile. That satisfied, perverse smile as she dropped the watch inside and hid it. "It's a lie!" Cameron screamed, standing and knocking over her chair. "It's a montage. It's AI. Alexander did that to not marry me. It's fake." But no one listened. The video changed. Now it showed the kitchen. Cameron pinching Sammy's arm viciously because the boy asked for water. The audio was clear. "Shut up, you brat. I hate you." The horror in the room was palpable. Abusing a child is the unforgivable sin. Mrs. Hayes, Cameron's mother, brought her hands to her mouth, seeing her daughter's true nature on giant screen. "Cameron, what did you do?" the mother whispered, horrified. The video changed one last time. Now it showed Valerie, showed the moment Valerie wiped the kid's tears. showed her teaching them to cook, laughing, covered in flour, showed pure, selfless love. The contrast was brutal. On one side, a witch in silk. On the other, an angel in employee clothes. The screen went black. The lights came on suddenly, blinding everyone for a second. Alexander stood, looking at Cameron with a mix of sadness and disgust. "AI, you say?" Alexander asked softly. "Cameras don't lie, Cameron. You planted that watch. You made my sons cry in pain. You tried to destroy an honest woman's life just out of envy." Cameron looked around, sought support, but found only repulsion looks. Her friends averted gazes, her parents red with shame. Her dreams of grandeur, of being Mrs. Vanderbilt, crumbling like sand through her fingers. "Alexander, please, let me explain. I was stressed. I love you." Cameron tried to babble, approaching him crying, this time real fear tears. "Cameron, don't come near me," he said. "The engagement is over, the wedding is canceled, and I want you out of my house right now." "What?" Cameron's eyes widened. "Where will I go?" "My things. Your things I'll send tomorrow in trash boxes, where they belong," Alexander said implacably. "Leave before I call the police and report you for theft and child abuse. Because I have the proof, Cameron, and believe me, I won't hesitate to use it if you don't disappear from my sight in a minute." Cameron looked to her mother for help. "Mom, tell him something." Mrs. Hayes stood, took her purse, and looked at her daughter coldly. "Let's go, Cameron. You've made enough of a fool of yourself today. You've dishonored the family." It was the final blow. Even her own mother rejected her. Cameron let out a frustration scream, a mix of howl and hysterical cry. She looked at Valerie, who sat still, watching everything with sadness, not enjoying the other's pain at all. "You!" Cameron screamed, pointing at Valerie. "This is all your fault, servant! You'll pay for this!" Cameron tried to lunge at Valerie, but two security guards Alexander had discreetly called intercepted her before 2 steps. They took her by the arms without much gentleness. "Let me go, do you know who I am?" Cameron yelled as they dragged her to the exit. Her heels scratched the floor, her red dress tangled in her legs. It was the image of total defeat. Cameron's screams faded until the front door closed with a dry slam. Boom! Silence returned to the dining room, but this time not tense silence. A relief silence, like after a storm when the sun comes out. Alexander sighed deeply, as if shedding a ton of weight. He turned to Valerie, who trembled slightly from the scene's violence. He knelt by her chair, at her level, ignoring the 50 guests watching. "Forgive me," he said, taking her hands. "Forgive me for doubting. Forgive me for letting them treat you like that. I was blind, but I swear, Valerie, as long as I live, no one will humiliate you again." Valerie looked him in the eyes, and with that infinite kindness characterizing her, smiled through tears. "You have nothing to forgive, sir. Just thank you." "Thank you for believing me." Alexander stood and looked at his guests. "The dinner is over," he announced. "Please leave. I have to see my sons and talk to the woman who saved their childhood." The guests, dazed but aware they'd witnessed something historic, started leaving silently. Alexander and Valerie were left alone in the grand dining room. He offered his hand to help her up. "Let's go," he asked. "Where?" she asked. "Upstairs. Sammy and Leo haven't slept. They're waiting for their Val to return, and I think someone owes them pancake dinner, even if it's late." Valerie laughed, a genuine crystal laugh that cleaned the mansion's air. "But in this dress I can't cook, sir. Then tomorrow I'll buy you 1,000 more dresses. But today you're the queen of this house." They walked together to the stairs, ascending to where the kids were. They didn't kiss. It wasn't needed yet. Love was there, floating in the air, born from truth and justice. The villain had fallen, and a new family, a true family, was starting to build on the lie's rubble. But wait, do you think this ends with a simple happily ever after? Ah, no, friends. There's still the closure, the final reflection, and seeing life a year later, because divine justice always has one last gift. Don't miss the last part because it'll fill your heart with hope. Ready for the grand finale? You thought the story ended with the villain's slammed door. Oh, my friends, how little you know life. A slam is just the end of noise, but the true silence, that healing silence after the storm, is where real happy endings are built. Because taking out the trash from the house is easy. The hard part is removing the bad smell left impregnated in the walls. And that night in the Vanderbilt mansion, though Cameron the witch was gone, 3 broken hearts remained needing urgent repair. Stay till the last second, because what Alexander did for Valerie is nameless, and I swear you'll cry with emotion. Alexander and Valerie ascended the stairs in silence. It wasn't awkward silence. It was respectful, almost sacred. The millionaire, who hours before walked with the world's owner arrogance, now climbed the steps with humility, guiding the woman who in a borrowed dress and mended soul had become the true owner of that house. They reached the twins' bedroom door. It was ajar. From inside came low sobs, those that break the soul because they sound like resignation. Dad said she was coming back, Leo's voice whispered in the dimness. Adults lie, Leo. Cameron said Val was bad. Maybe she'll never come back, Sammy replied with a voice too mature and sad for a 4-year-old. Alexander stopped short. Those words were a slap. Adults lie. He promised right there he'd never lie to his sons again. He looked at Valerie and nodded, giving her the go. Valerie pushed the door gently. Who said I wasn't coming back? She asked with that voice sweet like honey and cotton candy. The effect was immediate, miraculous. The 2 lumps under the sheets jumped like springs. They turned on the night lamp and seeing her there like a storybook princess in her blue dress, their eyes widened like saucers. Val! They shouted in unison. They didn't care about the fancy dress, didn't care about protocol. They leaped from the beds barefoot and ran to her. Valerie knelt on the fluffy rug, opening her arms, and received the impact of the 2 small bodies clinging to her like oxygen. Alexander stayed in the doorway watching. He saw Valerie bury her nose in his son's hair, inhaling their scent, saw her tears fall on their pajamas, and saw for the first time what the word mother really meant. It's not the one who gives birth, friends. It's the one who gives light. And Valerie was illuminating those kids' darkness. Sorry for taking so long, my loves. Sorry, Valerie sobbed. I had to go get my princess dress. Are you a real princess? Sammy asked, touching the shiny fabric with awe. Valerie looked up and met Alexander's gaze. He smiled, a tired but genuine smile. Yes, Sammy, she's the queen of this house, Alexander said, entering the room and sitting on the floor with them. Yes, the millionaire sat on the rug. And the witch? Leo asked fearfully, looking to the hallway. Alexander stroked his head. The witch is gone, champ, and I put a spell on the door so she can never enter again. From now on, only good people enter, people who love you. That night, no one slept in their beds. Alexander had pillows and blankets brought, and the 4 camped on the kids' room floor, telling stories and eating cookies. Pedro the driver sneaked up. It was the first night in 2 years Alexander slept without pills. He slept lulled by his son's peaceful breathing, and knowing a few feet away was the woman who'd brought life back to them. The next day, the offer of a lifetime. The following morning, the sun shone different. It's not cheap poetry, it's true. When bad vibes leave, even light enters better. Valerie had woken early out of habit, and though Alexander told her to rest, she was in the kitchen, but not in uniform. She wore comfy clothes Alexander had bought for her. She was making breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the house. Alexander came down still in robe and found her pouring orange juice. "Valerie, I told you today you don't work," he reproached, but smiling. "Sir, my hands don't know how to stay idle." Besides, the kids need to eat well after the burned eggs from— You know, she replied, laughing. They sat to breakfast, not her standing, him sitting, both at the table. Alexander looked at her seriously. Valerie, we need to talk. She got nervous. The dismissal trauma lingered. Did I do something wrong? No, you did everything right, and that's why this can't continue like this. Alexander pulled out a leather folder from his side. I don't want you as my housekeeper, Valerie. Valerie's heart stopped. He was firing her again. But sir, you're too smart and have too much heart to spend your life scrubbing my floors. I want something more. Alexander opened the folder. I want to hire you as the general manager of the mansion. You'll run everything. You'll hire cleaning staff, cooks, whatever you need. You won't wash dishes. You'll oversee that my sons are well, that the house is a home. Valerie's eyes widened, incredulous. But sir, I don't have degrees for that. You have the most important doctorate, human decency. Alexander interrupted. But if you want degrees, here's the second part of the offer. In this folder is paid tuition for college, business administration, or education, your choice. You'll study mornings while the kids are at school. I'll pay everything, and your salary, well, let's say your salary will be triple what you earned, plus full benefits and health insurance for your mother. Valerie started crying. She couldn't speak, just nodded, covering her mouth. It was her life's dream, to study, care for her mother, and stay near the kids she loved. I only ask one thing in return, Alexander said, lowering his voice and looking intensely. Anything, sir. Anything that you teach me, he said. Teach me to be a dad, to be like you. I've spent years thinking giving them money was giving love. Teach me to make dinosaur pancakes. Teach me to play. I want to make up for lost time. Valerie smiled through tears and extended her hand across the table. Deal, Mr. Vanderbilt, but I warn you, I'm a strict teacher on flower matters. A year later, fate's twist. Time, my friends, is the fairest judge. It puts each king on his throne and each clown in his circus. 12 months have passed since that fateful night. And what's happened? Let's take a peek. The Vanderbilt mansion is no longer gray. The garden is full of toys. There's a dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, running on the lawn. Music plays. Today is the twins' 5th birthday. There's a huge party in the garden, but not a stuffy, rich people boring party. There are bounce houses, taco trucks, clowns, and mixed are Alexander's millionaire partners with Valerie's humble neighborhood neighbors. Yes, Alexander has learned wealth doesn't fight simplicity. Alexander is by the grill with an apron saying, "Grill Master," laughing heartily with Pedro the driver. He looks 10 years younger, no longer has that bitterness wrinkle on his forehead. And Valerie is radiant. She just finished her first year of education with honors. She wears a simple but elegant dress and moves through the party like the owner and lady, but with the same humility as always. Suddenly, a figure approaches the entrance gate. A woman in brand clothes, but from past seasons and worn. Hair badly dyed, deep, dark circles. It's Cameron. No one invited her, of course. She found out via social media. After the video scandal, her reputation tanked. Her friends blocked her. Her mother, ashamed, cut off her money and sent her to a small apartment. Cameron has had to work selling cosmetics online to survive, and bitterness has consumed her. She looks old, not in age, but in soul. Cameron looks through the bars, sees Alexander hugging Valerie, sees the kids running to Valerie yelling, "Mommy Val!" Sees the happiness she tried to destroy and that ironically ended up solidifying. "It could have all been mine," Cameron murmurs, with a pure envy tear rolling down her cheap makeup cheek. "Can I help you, ma'am?" asks a security guard, the same Pedro now head of security. Cameron startles, looks at Pedro with disdain, trying to regain her old haughtiness. No, just looking at how the help thinks they're the owners. Disgusting. Pedro smiles, but not mockingly, with pity. "You're wrong, ma'am. Here there's no help. Here there's family, and family takes care of each other. Better move along. We don't want your bad vibes wilting the plants. Cameron turns and walks away alone, dragging her worn heels on the sidewalk, while behind her erupts applause and laughs because the kids just broke the piñata. It's the ending she deserved. Oblivion. The emotional closure. Inside the party, the sun starts setting, painting the sky orange and violet. Alexander takes a microphone. "Friends," he says, and all quiet. "A year ago I came home early and nearly fainted at what I saw. I thought I saw a disaster. I thought I saw dirt, but I was blind. What I saw was life knocking at my door." Alexander seeks Valerie among the crowd. She's wiping Leo's face with a napkin, just like that day. "Valerie," he calls. She looks up, blushing. "Come here, please." Valerie walks to him shyly. Alexander sets the mic down, pulls a black velvet box from his pocket, and before 300 people, kneels. Not as a boss to an employee, but as a man to the woman he loves. "I'm not offering a contract this time," Alexander says, voice shaky with emotion. "I'm offering my life. I'm offering to be the father your kids deserve. If you accept being the mother my sons already chose. Valerie Carter, would you do me the honor of marrying this old grump and teaching him to be happy the rest of his days?" Valerie covers her mouth, crying. The twins run and hug Alexander's legs. "Say yes, Val. Say yes," the kids shout. "Yes," she whispers, then yells. "Yes, of course, yes." Alexander slips on the ring. It's not a giant, ostentatious diamond like Cameron's. It's a green emerald of hope surrounded by small brilliants. He stands and kisses her. A long, tender kiss sealed with eternity's promise. Applause erupts. The fireworks Alexander had prepared just in case light the sky, and for a moment, the world seems perfect. Final reflection. So ends our story, dear friends, with a lesson I hope you keep deep in your heart. We live in a world that worships appearances, that values your clothes brand more than the mark you leave on others. Cameron had everything: beauty, money, status, but was empty. Valerie had nothing, just her working hands and giant heart, and ended up with everything. Remember this: lies have short legs, and evil always collects its due. You can fool everyone for a while, but not life forever. Be like Valerie. Work with love. Treat others' kids as your own. And keep your head high, even if the world tries to humiliate you. Because in the end, when you get home early or late, what matters isn't the luxury around you, but the love waiting. If this story made you feel something, if you cried from rage or joy, if you believe true love sees no social classes, share this video. Make this message reach someone needing hope today. I'm your narrator friend. And remember, sometimes angels don't have wings. They have yellow gloves and smell like vanilla. Until the next story. And don't forget to give a strong hug to whoever's beside you. Life is today. Cut.